Hello there, I'm Alicia Malone, and thanks for staying with us here on TCM. MGM was a studio billed as having more stars than there are in heaven, and the genre they excelled at more than any other is the musical. Our next film was released in 1953, around the time the movie musical was at its peak. In that 12-month period, MGM released films like The Bandwagon, Lily, Small Town Girl, Easy to Love, Dangerous When Wet. The list goes on. One of the most popular was our next movie, starring Howard Keel and Katherine Grayson, and based on a hit Broadway play with music by Cole Porter. Directed by George Sidney, it's Kiss Me Kate. Howard Keel and Katherine Grayson play a former husband and wife who were forced to star opposite each other in a production of William Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, and the sparks between them fly both on and off the stage. In the supporting cast is the always amazing Ann Miller, along with Keenan Wynn and Bob Fosse very early in his career, and this film became a huge stepping stone for him. Fosse had a pretty minor part, serving as a backup dancer and with just a few lines of dialogue. But he went out on a limb and asked the film's choreographer Hermes Pan if he could choreograph part of the number called From This Moment On. His section, which he danced with Carol Haney, lasted less than a minute, but went on to be one of the highlights of the movie. And when you see it, you'll immediately recognize Fosse's signature style. And that 48-second sequence eventually led to Fosse being hired to choreograph the Broadway show The Pajama Game, for which he won a Tony, the first of 9 he would eventually win. And of course, nearly 2 decades later, he made major waves in Hollywood as the Oscar-winning director of Cabaret. Here's where he got his big break from 1953, Kiss Me Kate. Kiss Me Kate is such a fun film, and if you notice that occasionally objects were tossed toward the camera or that Ann Miller kicked her legs in our direction, there's a reason for that. 3D films were all the rage in the early 1950s, so MGM tried to jump on the bandwagon with this movie, which was actually filmed in both 3D and the standard format. Unfortunately for the studio, the fad was more or less over by the time Kiss Me Kate was set to be released, so most audiences ended up seeing it in the regular format. And that was the great Ann Miller tapping away as Lois, who later said that she thought this was one of her best films. And what's so interesting about Ann Miller is that we all remember her as such a great dancer, which, as we just saw, she certainly was, but rarely does anyone talk about her ability as a singer. Yet she sang in all her movies and had a wonderful voice, the number Why Can't You Behave that she sung to Tommy Roll being a prime example. All right, up next, a change of pace with a skydiving drama starring Burt Lancaster and Gene Hackman, directed by John Frankenheimer. Stay with us.
Next on TCM, the Gypsy Moths. Then, Alice doesn't live here anymore. And later, Rambling Rose. TCM's No Shrinking Violet tonight.